Ah, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, a realm so vast it sprawled across half of Europe, a glittering crown, a proud nobility, endless golden halls. But behind the pageantry, filth, raw, unrepentant, and dripping with scandal. If you thought medieval kings were sinful, wait until you hear what these lords and ladies were doing once the candles went out. Before we dive into this pit of desire and disgrace, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want company in this gutter. Let's start at court. Velvet cloaks, jeweled goblets, holy crosses everywhere. Nobles swore to defend Christendom, but behind closed doors, they invented sins that made even the devil take notes. One of the vilest, the peasant test. Imagine a noble riding out to his estates, snatching a farm girl, sometimes barely grown, dragging her to the manor, and testing her like cattle. She wasn't courted, wasn't asked, just used. The more she cried, the more entertained the lord became. Horrified? Oh, that's just the warm-up. In candlelit chambers lined with icons of saints, nobles staged orgies with servants. Wine spilled across the floor, women forced to lick it up like animals. Men whipped until they bled, while priests peeked through curtains. And yes, the clergy joined in. Bishops were said to bless beds before they were fouled by sin. Why confess your crimes when the priest is standing there waiting his turn? And the queens? Don't think they were pure. In Warsaw's glittering palaces, rumors swirled of duchesses bathing in milk with stable boys. Ladies ordering silk ropes from Venice, not for curtains, but for games no vows ever mentioned. Courtiers gossiped of noble women dressing as men, storming banquets and declaring themselves the kings of the night. But the corruption didn't stop at the palaces. The army carried its own filth. Soldiers dragged camp followers, women forced to march, to serve food, and then serve again under the sheets. The law stayed silent, but the fires burned with muffled screams. Commanders treated women like spoils, trading them like dice in a tavern game. An army with a prize wasn't land, but flesh. And then came the secret societies. Candlelit taverns, locked doors, brotherhood feasts that turned into spectacles. Naked wrestling, ritual humiliation, endless drinking games. Every initiation ended the same way. The newcomer stripped, mocked, and broken, while the rest howled with laughter. This was the Commonwealth, a place of splendor on the outside and rot festering just beneath the velvet and gold.
Want filth with a twist of blasphemy? Look no further than the mock confessions. In these, women dressed as nuns, men as bishops, and they turned the sacrament of confession into a dirty theater. Every whispered sin was acted out immediately, right there in front of a drunken crowd. The Commonwealth was proud of its Catholic piety, but underneath, the bedroom told another story. Courtiers stuffed their journals with scandal, writing coded lines about feasts and merriments that everyone knew meant hours of sweating bodies, broken vows, and dark appetites. They prayed by day, but by night they wrote a new gospel of filth. Even punishments had a sexual sting. Criminals accused of lustful crimes were whipped naked in public squares. And nobles, they sometimes staged mock trials in their halls, sentencing servants to pleasures as penalties. You can imagine the screams. And peasants, don't be fooled, village life was no cleaner. Folk rituals at midsummer included fertility dances around fires, couples pushed together by force, encouraged to make the earth fertile. Some ended in joy, many in tears. By the late 1700s, as the Commonwealth crumbled under foreign powers, so too did its reputation. Foreign visitors wrote letters home describing a land of great beauty and great filth. They called it a kingdom of excess, a place where power and sex tangled in a knot so tight no one could pull it apart. And that, my friends, was the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, golden on the outside, rotten at the core. They wore crowns, they carried swords, but in the bedroom, they ruled like beasts. And history never forgets the smell of that filth. If you thought the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth had already hit rock bottom in Part 1, think again, because the rot went deeper, much deeper. Behind the golden portraits, behind the marble pillars, were secrets so filthy they could curdle milk. And tonight, we peel back another layer. Let us start with the nobles, those proud slakta, draped in long kantouche coats, mustaches curled, sabers at their side. They demanded honor, loyalty, Catholic virtue, and yet their private games were nothing but holy. One favorite pastime, the masked feast. At first, it looked like a masquerade ball. Velvet masks, silken gowns, violins playing. But once the doors were barred, masks dropped, and what followed was less ball, more bacchanal. Men with women, women with women, men with men. Partners traded like coins. Nobles writing afterwards joked in letters. 1 mask, 10 faces, 20 sins. They called it dancing. History calls it chaos.
The clergy, they weren't innocent. Many bishops in Vilnius and Krakow lived like lords. One bishop was rumored to keep a garden of roses. Lovely metaphor? Not quite. His roses were young choir boys dressed in silken tunics, paraded like flowers at feasts. Guests were expected to pick a rose for the night. How holy. And monasteries? Some whispered they were less places of prayer, more hidden theaters of indulgence. Pilgrims arrived expecting miracles. Instead, they found nuns exchanging vows in candlelit dormitories that no priest dared interrupt. Who needs heaven when the convent was already burning with desire? The Commonwealth armies carried their own dirt. Officers, drunk on mead, created contests. The night duel, they called it. 2 soldiers, 1 woman, winner takes all. The woman? She had no say. Victories weren't measured in honor, but in how loudly she cried. And during long sieges, women were locked inside castles, forced to serve the garrison. In Chronicles, it is written blandly, supplies shared. But everyone knew what that meant. The nobles liked cruelty. They mixed pain with pleasure. Whipping servants wasn't just discipline, it was entertainment. Dinner guests were invited to watch as punishments turned into twisted games. Some nobles bragged of inventing devices, gilded whips, heated irons, velvet ropes, all in the name of keeping their halls lively. Forget theater, the show was in the dungeon. And peasants, their world wasn't clean either. Pagan traditions still lingered in the countryside. Fertility rites, midnight rituals, naked dances in fields. Villagers claimed it was for the harvest, but when half the village stumbled out of barns panting and covered in hay, everyone knew better. One ritual, the Kupala night. Fires lit, couples pushed into woods, chants echoing. Some called it ancient magic. Others called it sanctioned chaos. A girl who returned alone was mocked. A girl who returned with scratches and tears was praised as fertile. Foreigners were stunned. French envoys wrote letters describing the Commonwealth as the most devout land with the dirtiest secrets. Germans mocked the Poles as holy in the church, unholy in the bed. Even the Russians, hardly saints themselves, called them pigs in velvet. Imagine being so filthy that even your neighbors blush. And the queens? Their gossip deserves its own stage. Queen Marie Casimir, wife of John III Sobieski, was rumored to keep an entire cabinet filled with love letters, not from her husband, but from her lovers. Courtiers whispered that she orchestrated private rehearsals before royal balls, ensuring she had more than one partner for the evening. And duchesses, they competed.
Who had the finest lover, the strangest toy, the boldest scandal? Venetian silks were imported not just for gowns, but for games. Noblewomen laughed about it openly, claiming that Polish winters demanded creative ways to keep warm.
When the snow fell, so did every rule of decency. Punishments grew filthier with the years. Servants stripped in public squares, not just whipped, but mocked with humiliations staged by their masters. Justice often meant spectacle, with nobles daring each other to devise the most indecent punishments. And let us not forget the drinking. The Commonwealth was drunk, constantly. Mead, vodka, beer, wine, and nothing fuels filth like alcohol. A banquet without someone stripping, vomiting, or worse was considered boring. Foreign visitors complained they couldn't tell if they were attending a feast or a brothel. In the Commonwealth, sobriety was the real scandal. By the 1700s, the Golden Republic was collapsing. Its borders shrank, its glory faded. But the filth? That survived until the end. Even as Russian, Prussian, and Austrian armies tore it apart, nobles still threw masked feasts, still played cruel games, still whispered gossip over goblets of mead. And when the Commonwealth finally died in 1795, it left behind no empire, no lasting power, just a reputation. A land remembered not just for its kings and battles, but for its filth, a filth so deep even history holds its nose. And that was the Commonwealth's secret legacy. Not glory, not honor, but filth dressed in gold. And the stink of it lingers still. Ah, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, once hailed as the jewel of Europe. But behind its noble masks and golden crowns, a cesspit of lust, scandal, and filth so shocking it makes even the most sinful brothel look innocent. Let's start in the glittering halls of Warsaw. Nobles strutted in their contus robes, sabers dangling, pretending to be the guardians of honor. But when the banquet doors closed, honor was the first thing stripped away. Feasts turned into orgies. Entire families were dragged in, wives, daughters, even servants. No one spared from the noble's appetite. And the louder the music played, the wilder the games became. Priests were no saints either. Imagine a bishop, draped in gold and jewels, sipping mead while his choir boys knelt before him, not to pray, but to perform. Cathedrals became theaters of corruption, with crucifixes watching silently from the walls. Holy water was replaced with wine, hymns with moans. The church, instead of condemning, quietly joined the revels.
And the peasants? They were trapped in this carnival of humiliation. Kupala night, a festival of fertility, turned into legalized chaos. Villagers were pushed into the woods, stripped and paired off like cattle at market. Nobles watched with goblets in hand, betting on who would last the longest. By dawn, laughter echoed through the forests, mixed with cries of shame. But it didn't stop in villages. In castles, torture became entertainment. Dungeons filled with peasants, chained to walls. Velvet ropes and heated irons weren't just punishments, they were foreplay. Nobles invited guests to watch, sipping spiced wine as victims screamed. Pain and pleasure were indistinguishable. Cruelty was the showpiece of power. The Commonwealth thrived on spectacle. A noble could wager his serf's dignity in a gambling hall. Women were staked like dice, their lives rolled on a table for sport. Coins clattered, goblets spilled, and lives were ruined with the toss of a card. All under candlelight, while masked courtesans whispered promises of more filth to come. And even monasteries hid their sins. Nuns pressed together in dormitories, habits torn in the dark. Priests smuggling novices through side doors. Every holy vow broken under torchlight, with rosaries tangled in sheets. gossip whispered through villages. The convent was less a sanctuary and more a secret brothel funded by faith. And if that wasn't enough, nobles carried their vices into public. Village squares became stages of humiliation. Women stripped, peasants forced to crawl in chains, mocked by crowds, all under the excuse of discipline. But it wasn't justice, it was voyeurism, cruelty dressed as tradition. Decadence bled into every corner. In hunting lodges, nobles sprawled across fur rugs with courtesans, hunting horns tossed aside for fleshly pursuits. In carriages, women were dragged off village roads and shoved inside. In gardens, masked men chased terrified servants through hedges while lanterns flickered above. And as the Commonwealth neared its end, the parties only grew filthier. Nobles sensed their power slipping, so they clung harder to indulgence. Feasts became grotesque displays. Tables collapsed under the weight of women and wine. Crowns rolled across the floor. The empire was crumbling, but in its halls the only concern was pleasure. Was this politics? Was this culture? Or was it the desperate howl of a dying state? Perhaps all three. But one thing's certain. The Commonwealth drowned in its own sins long before enemies carved it apart. And so, the empire that claimed to defend honor, chivalry, and Christ himself collapsed not under swords, but under its own filthy desires.